unfortunately, those organizations, extreme Islamic organizations like Hamas, are growing by the minute. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, everyone in the West will experience it. I hope not. I really pray not. But I'm afraid when we say the West is next, I think people don't comprehend what we mean.
This is a Visegrad 24 series about the Israel-Hamas War.
My name is Stefan Thompson and I'm here with Visegrad 24. We're on the ground in Israel, getting the perspective from ground zero, from where things are happening. I'm meeting here with professors, journalists, experts, influencers, Nova survivors, families of hostages, and today I'm with Keren Pikes, the spokeswoman for the National Information System for... Tell me more, Keren.
Okay, National Public Diplomacy Directorate in Israel. Yeah, it's a very, very complex name.
It's a long and complex name, but Keren's mission is dealing with journalists.
Right, with international press.
And this is where my first question comes in. What is Israel's strategy with dealing with media? There's been a very strenuous relationship with Western media, with liberal media. The New York Times, the BBC have literally run Hamas-controlled Gaza Ministry of Health stories as fact. This has had real life ramifications. What is Israel's strategy here? How is Israel dealing with this?
I'll start with, I'm a former journalist, as
Sure.
We spoke about this before, and I'm a former journalist. I understand the needs of journalists, and I understand what kind of information they require to, let's say, cover the story in the most balanced way. I think any journalist in this region faces the challenge, given the fact that you have so many channels. There's so many channels today. It's not like it's been, 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. It's nothing like it. So it's very tough for them to stay on top of the story. Now, when we started this war, there was the whole situation, the whole incident, we'll call it, of the hospital bombing, right?
Correct.
That right away, Hamas came out and said 500 dead, or the health ministry came out, the Palestinian health ministry came out saying 500 dead, which was instant, okay? And every journalist knows this, that if you have numbers right away, something is fishy there because nobody can come up with such quick stats. At the end of the day, what happened there is that I think that all channels understood, all Western channels understood, that you have to treat this conflict or this war with a lot more judgment, editorial judgment, than any other war. It's a very difficult war to cover. Now, when it comes to Israeli strategy, to your question, I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that nobody forgets about October 7. The atrocities that took place at October 7, it's unprecedented, okay? It shook us all. It shook any human being, I think. So at the end of the day, we want everyone to remember that this is what happened, and this is why Israel is currently fighting, the soldiers are currently fighting in Gaza. This is first and foremost. Secondly, we want to make sure that journalists use verified information, okay? And we all know that when there's no information available, that kind of vacuum usually is fed by negative information or unbalanced information or even wrong information, okay? So we make sure, and we are a country, a democratic country, we make sure that when we come out with facts, they're actually facts. They're checked, they're verified, and this is what we deliver.
Including uncomfortable facts?
Including uncomfortable facts.
Could you give me some examples?
For instance, when unfortunately, and it was a painful day for all of us Israelis, but also, I would say anybody, could resonate with that. When the 3 hostages that were accidentally killed by Israeli soldiers in Gaza, it was one of the more painful days that we all experience, okay? Journalists as well, by the way. So we could, I think that that's the beauty about Israel, is that the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, came out almost hours, like really few hours after the actual incident happened and told the story from A to Z and explained the responsibility that Israel carries here. Now, this is no easy story to talk about, no easy story to explain to Israeli public, and for sure not for international public, but we've done it. And I think this is a key example to Israel, to the Israeli, I would say, strategy overall that looks at things with transparency.
There is a recurring belief that Israel is winning the war on the ground, but losing the war in the information space. I'm not even talking here about the Arab world, which is obviously the media landscape there is completely pro-Palestinian, or very staunchly so, pro-Hamas very often even. But I'm talking about the Western world here, Western Europe, Northern America. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I'll start by saying this is a war for the security of Israel. It's not a war about, how many likes you get on a post on social media. And this is important to state.
But there is an informational battlefield. There is,
I agree with you.
In the sense
I
of
agree with you.
The truth, in a sense of real-time denial of October 7th, which is an incredible thing that we've witnessed. Eisenhower said when the concentration camps were being liberated, the extermination camps, the American soldiers and Allied soldiers are going through and freeing some of the camps. He said, take photos of this because in 20 years there will be people, he said, the actual quote is, there will be bastards who will say this never happened. He talked about a 20-year time frame. We have watched, and it's been incredible to watch in real time, the denial of October 7th, saying, no, it's artificial intelligence, Israeli staged it, it was done by Israeli, it was a false flag operation. These are things that are, and this is not, I'm not talking about a few nutcases on the internet, saying that this is a commonly held belief amongst many Arabs, many people across the Middle East, people who hate Israel, hate the Jews, but also amongst Westerners. This is why I'm saying this battlefield, obviously I understand the security issue. I'm not asking about that. I'm asking in this case truly about the battlefield of ideas and the battlefield of information, control of information, and obviously there is we're in a battlefield, right, where we have the Iran, Russia, China axis that has allied itself to these proxies, to Hamas, to Fatah, to Hezbollah, and they have a well-funded, well-oiled, well-functioning and very effective machine.
I agree with you.
That is disseminating mass disinformation.
I agree with you. First and foremost, I agree with you.
No, I know. I was just sort of trying to get the conversation going.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the way that, let's say, the attack by Hamas on October 7th happened, they obviously planned a very calculated propaganda machine. Mm-hmm. They've done that for years. We can see it. This is not new, okay? This is a result of 30 years of work, okay, of Hamas-fueled work, or whatever, Iran or whatever a power that has taken care of this. Now, as for the information campaign, yes, absolutely. They have more numbers than the Israelis, more money, okay, and we see, there are reports about that, on how much money they have in fueling this campaign. We are with less numbers. We obviously use different channels. We also so-called tied up by checking everything and verifying everything. After all, we're a state. We're not a terror organization as Hamas is. So they can allow themselves with other aspects that we can't. We're a country. We have responsibility. We have to portray, or we have to broadcast to the world the absolute truth as we see it at that moment, right? Now, let's take it a little bit further. From the river to the sea has become a trend around the world. We see it. We see that around, I would say, among the Gen Zs, this has become the new sort of trendy fashion, okay? I'm not really sure they know what they're backing. I'm not really sure. For instance, I've seen I've seen Black Lives Matter back Hamas. At the end of the day, I don't know if they're aware of this, but a Tanzanian civilian was murdered and brutally murdered on October 7, as well as all the Israelis that have been, very viciously killed. So at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of ignorance happening here. It's our job, the Israeli state job, to clarify that. This is something that we learned through this war, that we'll need to invest more and more efforts, more and more resources into this educational campaign. We have to do it. We have no choice. We're alone in this battle, right? And after all, anti-Semitism hasn't started now. It's probably becoming more and more a trend as well, and we're trying very hard to tackle that.
Do you feel that there is a double standard in the way that Western media and journalists hold Israel and the Palestinian Authority or Hamas accountable for things? That is there a double standard?
I think that sometimes, I wouldn't say a double standard. I don't think that's the right way to describe it. I think that Israel has always been seen, and, at the end of the day, we're in a very much picture-taken or footage-led kind of war.
Of course, very much so.
So you see the kibbutzim around Gaza, and they look rich, and the people, look rich, and probably from European background or American background, whatever it is, okay? And then you see the Palestinians in Gaza living in great density. It's the most crowded place on earth. There's a lot of destruction there. So obviously, we're starting this conflict, or we're starting this war with some sort of unbalanced picture. I would call it that way. Now, I think that the world... Give me 1 second. I'm almost there. So I think that the world at the moment sees Israel, and has been seeing Israel over the years, as the stronger part of this conflict, as a stronger part of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, okay? And it's used to that. But there has been a real change in the paradigm. Why? Because Israel was attacked here. Israel was invaded by Hamas, okay? And it was invaded in the most vicious way. Hamas Nukhba's fighters, what they've done and what these terrorists done is murder children, murder dogs for some reason, murder women, whole families, rape, everything else, right? We know that. In mass scale. So at the end of the day, our job as the Israeli state is to basically make sure that they understand what took place here. And I'm not really sure that everybody understands to the full scale what happened. Israel was never invaded this way. This is the first time.
How do you feel when you see protests across the Western world, when you see hundreds of thousands of people march in London with Palestinian flags, some of them with vile slogans? You see this happening in New York, you see this happening in Toronto, you see this happening across every major capital and major city in the Western world. You hear slogans that are often call for the destruction of the state of Israel from the river to the sea. Now we've been hearing Westerners support the Houthis with Yemen make us proud. And we've also seen women's rights organizations stay completely silent about many of the atrocities. I mean, the protesters, I'm linking the two because the protesters go out, they shout usually for a ceasefire, but never for the release of hostages, or very rarely so. And we've also seen this with women's rights organizations. Tell me, how does this make you feel on a even on an emotional level?
On the personal level, when I look at these images and when I look at these protesters, obviously there's multiple emotions that, because at the end of the day, the Israeli state has been around for over 70 years, right? And when you look at these things, you look at these events, you ask yourself a very hard question. What went wrong here? Haven't we learned anything of what can happen when you don't pay attention to such incidents? And I do hope that all the Western countries are looking at these, whether it's London and New York or anywhere else that these demonstrations are taking place, looking at these demonstrations and asking themselves these hard questions, because such behavior, anti or calls for anti-Jews, that shouldn't happen, really, against any nationality.
Of course.
Shouldn't happen. Now, if we're talking about the sexual violence that took place on October 7th, I'm just going to open brackets here and say sexual violence or sexual abuse or rape has been considered a weapon of war all around the world. We know this, right?
Yeah.
Here, it was exercised and mass scale. I think in cruelty that has never been seen. I haven't seen such images, and I actually volunteer in a rape crisis center. The stories that you hear haunt me on a personal level, haunt me every day. The images haunt me. These are things that, I think we were not even at the beginning of understanding what happened there, because the stories are not out. Rape is not a crime, or violence is not, sexual violence is not a crime that everybody shouts and talks about. It's not like having your bag stolen, where it's easier to talk about. It's a crime or
A violation.
a violation or a traumatizing violation, okay, that usually women or men, it takes them time until they discuss it openly.
Yes.
Now, the fact that a lot of these organizations said that there isn't real evidence for it, you should take that question to them, honestly. Ask them what made them not condemn what happened on October 7th. It took the UN, a women organization, 55 days to condemn it. I would turn the question to them. How come they stayed silent over this? I'm not really sure what the answer is, honestly.
You have a long career as a journalist behind you. You've worked in media for many years on both sides of the aisle. We've seen a transformation of the media landscape. How has that affected your work? The digitization of media and the transformation of media into very powerful citizen journalists with massive followings, or even platforms like Visegrad 24, which is in the first 3 days of the war, we generated on X 3 times more impressions than CNN, the New York Times, and the BBC combined. How do you deal with, and obviously Visegrad has taken a staunchly anti-terrorist stance, an anti-Hamas stance. Many of the other accounts, there was a University of Washington report that featured 7 accounts. The only one of those, the 7 accounts that were referred to as new elites, the only one that was anti-terrorist and it wasn't. It's not that I'm pro-Israel. I'm pro-Western, and I see a terrorist organization, I see a massacre, and I side with the victims. It's a common sense approach. But the 6 other accounts that had generated a combined reach of 1.8 billion impressions the first 3 days of the war, the 6 others were either pro-Palestinian or centrist, impartial, trying to see both sides of the terror attack. How do you deal with this transformed media landscape?
Like you said, this October 7th was a massacre, a very painful massacre. I don't think any Israeli has fully comprehended what we went through here. And I know from my friends abroad, and I know from all journalists, actually, that used to be my colleagues that contacted me on that day, they all were appalled. Okay. I think the landscape has become, although there is a richness of material, has become more and more challenging to handle, also for the journalists themselves, also for any kind of channel, media channel around. You don't know what is AI-driven, what is true or false, what is real, what actually been verified. You don't know. But you're also competing against each other, so you have to put it out there. And we've seen many, I would say, updates, broadcasts, whatever, that had to withdraw and apologize. And this is unprecedented. Honestly, it's unprecedented. This war has made everyone's work, or I would say this reality of frequent and immediate and fast-track information has made their work, the journalist work, and any kind of media channel much harder and much more challenging, as well as our work much more challenging. So, for instance, when I see something out there that could be harming Israel, damaging its reputation, I have to immediately either respond or handle the narrative, right, very quickly. This is something that I haven't seen done in such a scale before. And this is thanks to all this richness of information.
Do you feel, and do you see, and have you seen, and do you know if it's being countered by Israel, the organized disinformation machine of the Iranians, the Chinese, the Russians? They have flooded the internet. There was a report, an NCRI report, that showed that on TikTok specifically, for every hashtag that was pro-Israeli, in the sense of bringing the hostages home, I stand with Israel, free the hostages, there were 57 pieces of content saying from the river to the sea, stand with Palestine, free Palestine, 57 to 1. Obviously, there's many more Muslims than there are Jews in the world, so that makes sense from that perspective. But there is definitely a sense from the reports that I've seen that much of this is not organic content. I was wondering, does Israel have a strategy to counter those bot farms, those paid influencers, those paid actors, people like Jackson Hinkle, for example, a very prominent voice with a very prominent platform and a very prominent reach? What's the strategy here?
Good question. First of all, I follow NCRI reports, and I totally agree with them and agree with you. It's obvious that not all is organic content. We see that. Again, well planned, well calculated by Hamas and their supporters. Yeah, they've done it. The same way that they invaded Israel with GoPro cameras, okay? They've done the same with this propaganda machine. They obviously planned it, and it's obviously fueled and calculated and well executed. We'll say that for them, okay?
No, the propaganda is very good quality. I
agree with you.
It is impressively executed.
I agree with you. My personal belief, I don't have it verified by any security official in Israel, so forgive me if I'm wrong, Israeli officials, but my personal belief is that as well as they calculated the invasion on October 7th and the massacre and had the GoPros to show off what they've done, they planned here this propaganda attack. It's an attack. It's a war, okay? It's the same kind of war as we've seen on the ground. Now, on the Israeli side of things and the strategy moving forward, if before, Israel has obviously invested in promoting its narrative, promoting its story and brand, we'll call it, so-called brand, outside. Today, Israel understands that it needs to do a lot more. What we've seen happening in the university, what we've seen happening on social, what we've seen happening with human rights organizations that should condemn the atrocities and haven't done in full scale. We understand that there is a whole educational campaign that needs to be executed, and we will invest more and more into it. That's obvious. Now, at the end of the day, Israel today is focused on winning this war, on destroying Hamas, its infrastructure, so Israeli civilians are, Israeli civilians everywhere, or even Jews everywhere, are safer, okay? I don't believe that we'll ever be completely safe because this is the region, but I do believe that we can be a lot safer, okay? And that October 7 should not repeat ever again. Now, as for everything we do on the information side of things, I'll just say this. We brought in a lot of new technologies to everywhere around from the IDF to the government and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to elaborate here because unfortunately, I don't want Hamas to have enhance their weapon against us. But I do believe that that from now on, you'll see a different kind of information campaign by Israel.
When you travel to the West, Western Europe, North America, do you feel safe? Have you been since October 7th outside of Israel?
I've been once, and I have to say that I don't feel safe. I have another passport, so I use that passport. I wouldn't feel comfortable using an Israeli passport at the moment. You know,
Do you wear a Star of David, and when you travel abroad, do you have any?
it's a good question. I don't wear necklaces, but will I feel comfortable traveling around the world wearing a Star of David? Probably not. Probably not. We've seen violence around the world targeting, we've seen organizations targeting Jews all around the world, right? We've seen it even in Los Angeles. So at the end of the day, no, I don't feel safe. I hope that one day we'll feel better and we'll feel safer there. I think it doesn't prevent me from moving freely around the world. At the moment, I'm focusing my efforts, and I'm a volunteer here to the Hasbara, to the information.
Public advocacy.
Campaign. So I'm focusing my effort on helping there where I can, from my experience as a former journalist and so on. Once I hope this war is well, first of all, I'm sure Israel will win this war. But once this is all over, and I hope it will be soon, then I'll see how I treat the world again. But I think the world has shown different colors than what we used to see from the Western world.
Do you feel betrayed?
It's a good question. Don't know if I feel betrayed, but I feel disillusioned. I told a story to a friend last night. My father, who may rest in peace, who's no longer with us, he passed away last year, used to say to me, anti-Semitism is never dead. You choose not to see it. And I used to have these arguments with him. You know, you're so old school. How come you say that? You're wrong. And I think he was probably right. And that's something that I need to live with, as of every other Israeli. And we need to talk about it more and be open about it more. And maybe that way we can change minds, because I think the information gap and the ignorance around the world about why we're here, why Israel was built, why is it important to have the state of Israel around, and why October 7 happened is outstanding. It's staggering. It shocks me on a daily basis. I also believe that, unfortunately, those organizations, extreme Islamic organizations like Hamas, are growing by the minute. And unfortunately, you know, I hate to say it, everyone in the West will experience it. I hope not. I really pray not. But I'm afraid when we say the West is next, I think people don't comprehend what we mean.
Keren Pikes, I'm sorry that we've run out of time and that we're ending it on such a sad note. It's a sombering piece of advice. It's a sombering warning. I fear that the enemy is within the West already. I fear, unfortunately, I believe, unfortunately, that you're most likely right. Keren Pikes, thank you so much for your time. Much
Thank
appreciated.
you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.